Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of The Truth About Addiction. Today, I am doing a solo interview. I am speaking openly and honestly from my heart about my own story. And maybe I should have started the podcast this way, but I'm sort of glad I didn't. A recent life event has me and my entire world turned upside down. And I feel that it is incredibly pertinent and timely that I do this now. And so while it will not be my complete story, because there's so much to cover, I'm going to let you guys in on some of the story of my life. And I'll go back in time, but I will very much make it current, with the topic of focus being grief, an ever present feeling with the entire world going through a pandemic that's killed people we love, killed off former versions of ourselves, life as we knew it, relationships, careers. I think it's a really important thing to start talking about more vulnerably, more openly. And to be honest, I can't think of a better person to have this conversation than me. So here we go.
So tell me what you need, and tell me where you bleed, and I will listen. I can listen. Oh, I will listen to you.
Welcome, you guys, to The Truth About Addiction. And in this case, the hard truth about grief and loss, and how on earth we're supposed to navigate that in a sober way. And if you're not an addict, how we navigate it without completely numbing out. And that doesn't have to look like abusing drugs and alcohol to not feel your feelings. That can look like sitting on the couch every single night, binge watching Netflix and stuffing your face with potato chips. I know people that do that. And it is a slower go than snorting cocaine and dropping dead of an overdose. But in a way, it's the same. It's just an escape route to not feel your feelings, especially feelings as unrelenting and disturbing as grief. So whoever you are, whether you have addiction in your past story, in your family, in your own life, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, television, food, retail therapy, gambling, in one degree or another, us humans don't like to suffer. And some of the greatest suffering happens in the thick of a grief spell. And I just want to talk about how the fuck we get through it when there is no escape route. So here's what I want you guys to know about me today. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I fully believe that addiction is a family disease. I believe that I grew up with it in my genetic line, and that I witnessed it all around me in different iterations from a very young age. And the role that I played growing up was the caretaker. And it's not even that anyone asked me to do that. It was just my natural disposition. So I would take the emotional temperature of everybody in the room, and I would morph into whatever was necessary to, if the temperature was too hot, cool it down. If it was too cold, warm it up. And really what I was doing was abandoning myself and my own emotional needs at the expense of making sure everybody else was okay. So I was more of a codependent, unbeknownst to me early on, than I was an addict. And I was exposed to quite a bit. Some people have stories of horrible types of physical and sexual abuse. That's not my story, but my story is one of exposure to prescription drug abuse, infidelity, wild stories of sex with both genders, sneaking out, lying, doing lots of hard drugs. A father who was emotionally somewhere else, unavailable, checked out, very out of touch with his own feelings, and so couldn't possibly be in touch with my own. And how that manifested for me was I did not have a sense of what was quote unquote normal or not. I didn't know what was going on in anybody else's house. So in an effort to be intimate, and I mean emotionally intimate, with my friends growing up, I would do what Brene Brown calls hotwire intimacy. So again, unbeknownst to my small self, I was oversharing, sharing about things that were happening in my house, things that I was doing. I was exploring my sexuality. None of it seemed weird to me because of what was being modeled in my home. I explored drugs a little bit. That didn't seem weird. I mean, I just spoke really honestly and openly about my own experimentation. And in an effort, I realized, now, to be close to people. And of course, everyone's young and everyone, is rather intimidated by information like that. And a lot of the time it ended up being used against me. And so I was called a lesbian. I was called a slut. By the end of, senior year in high school, all the people I thought were my friends were not at all my friends. And I just remember I couldn't wait to get out from this small town mindset that was Brooklyn, New York, and go away to college and experience some kind of intellectual cracking open of my world that I yearned for and did not get. A place that I could have wild, intriguing conversations and feel stimulated and not feel judged. And I got a lot of that when I went away to BU for a couple of years. And I would say the first thing I was addicted to was perfectionism. And that showed up in a really harsh way at BU. I, went out and made it a point to prove that I would not be the freshman to gain 15 pounds. I would not be the freshman to flunk out, of my first semester. And I came home thinner. Then I left and I came home with a 3.8, and I got this really fancy award from Boston University for how well I was doing academically. And it all looked so good on the surface. And I remember getting a professor who just didn't think I was as good as all these other teachers did. And I could not get anything better than a C with him. And I could not handle it. To me, a C might as well have been an F. I honestly don't remember intentionally going into this one assignment going, I'm going to plagiarize and that is how I'm going to get my A, because I cannot tolerate getting a C. I don't remember consciously, mindfully going in to cheat, but I do remember feeling, insufferable around not performing perfectly. And so I did plagiarize, did not cite my sources, and he sent me back with a big red 0, come see me after class. And what that turned into was me being suspended from Boston University for a year and a half. So option A, take a year and a half off, come back to school as a junior when all my friends would be almost graduating. Option B, don't go back. Just change the trajectory of your life. And so I was really too ashamed to even consider coming back. I moved to New York. It's actually the year that I met my now husband. So, you can call that what you want. Maybe it's fate. And I started to try to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, audition for dancing. I started bartending. And it was really this time in my early 20s when my addiction started to take off. And as soon as I was behind a bar and I started to be able to drink and have access to alcohol, and I realized how quickly I could get buzzed. And then I noticed somebody doing cocaine. And I tried it, didn't do anything for me, but then I tried it again, and I realized, wow, every time I do this, I can drink more. It just became the perfect storm. And really within a couple of years, it took me to my knees. I overdosed. I don't remember any of this, had a seizure with a woman who was almost 10 years my senior, who I hardly knew. And really only because she was also very high on cocaine and didn't know me well enough to know where I lived, had no success calling an ambulance, and instead called a mutual friend to come over and kind of keep the peace that night. And the very next day was Christmas Eve. I went to my sister's in-laws' house. I had cocaine from the night before. I told her what happened, and she put some on her fingernail. We did some cocaine, and she said, you just need to control how much you do. Don't worry, you just did too much. So that gives you a real glimpse into the dysfunction and also the denial I had, that my sister had, that, I grew up around in regards to, all kinds of things, certainly drugs and alcohol. And it took a long time after that to actually get sober. So this is one of those moments, where people who are not sober continue to ask, I don't get it. How could they still drink and use? They've been in the hospital, 5 times. They've lost their job. They lost their kids. They're homeless. They're this judgmental. How could you? It's because we lose the power to choose. I am this high functioning, intelligent woman, capable of all these different things. I tried deeply for years to control my drinking and using, came up with every version of how I was going to do it so it would stay nice and controlled. And what happens when you are truly an addict is you lose the power of choice. And so I did. And it would be another year and change before I ended up in a meeting with my arms crossed in the back, super fucking angry. I did not want to be sober. Shame and embarrassment and kind of getting found out is what got me into the rooms, not because I, on a soul level, had bottomed out. That would take many more years. And all the while, here I am trying to get sober. Everyone's talking about God in the meetings. And I grew up in a home with a raging atheist for a mom, and there was no God, and God was for the weak. And the only person you can count on is yourself. I think that's a big issue with a barrier to entry in these 12-step programs is people hear the word God, 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 God. People hear these archaic prayers and they just think, no fucking way am I going to be converted into some cult and made to believe that all my problems are going to solve themselves through God. And God damn it, that is not what 12-step programs are. It's not a religious version of God. It took me so long to untangle my hardwired upbringing beliefs about God, my cultural conception of God, and all these things that had been spoon-fed to me, unclipping those wires and then going, gosh, if I am a blank slate and God is anything I want it to be, what does that look like? What does that look like? And that type of open-mindedness and surrender is what was really required for me to have a new experience in my life. And that truly did not happen until my marriage fell apart about 4 years into my sobriety. And that's a story for another day. But what I can tell you is that I spent many, many, many months sleeping on different people's couches in a separation period from him. And I was so wrapped around his love for me. You know, my sense of self-worth was inextricably connected to his love for me, that when his love for me pulled away, I felt like I was disappearing and falling through the earth. And it wasn't until I was that spiritually bankrupt that I started to really recover. And one of the greatest moments for me was when I worked with a sponsor during that time. And instead of talking about drugs and alcohol as we went through the steps, you know, the steps became about the crisis that I was in. And I have given this piece of advice to so many people, whether you're a drug addict or not, taking the language of the 12 steps and applying it to your life situation is a fucking game changer. For example, step number 1 in Alcoholics Anonymous is I am powerless over alcohol and my life has become unmanageable. That is a critical step every 24 hours if you want to stay sober. It becomes less important day to day as you have more time sober. And so for my marriage, it became, I am powerless over what is happening in my marriage, my husband, whether he's telling me the truth, whether I'll ever find out for sure, whether my intuition is correct, or whether this thing is just a big mess because of all the mistakes I made. And when I try to exert power over him, by making him go to therapy, go to meetings, tell me the truth, my life becomes unmanageable in the following ways. I feel enraged. I feel catastrophically stressed. I have no peace. I have no surrender. I have no clear guidance from my inner knowing. Okay. And so we went through the steps like that. And when we got to the 9th step, which is making an amends, she said, have you ever made an amends to yourself? And it was a radical question. Never. As such a diehard perfectionist, somebody who had been so self-critical under my own willpower, you know, nothing was ever enough. The idea of forgiving myself, letting myself off the hook for anything was unimaginable, let alone for the behavior I had exhibited on the front end of my relationship with my husband, the cheating, the lying, the constant deceit. And yet, that was a crucial turning point for my own sense of self-worth, for a foundation of self-compassion, which is now not just a practice, but a lifestyle. And also for what would become the bedrock of forgiveness in my marriage. I am happily married this very moment to this same man. And so everything from that point on has really been a beautiful upward trajectory of spiritual evolution, not without gross amounts of pain and suffering. And to touch upon grief, 3 years ago, I lost my dad rather suddenly. And I had done a lot of work spiritually to try and forgive him for the dad he was not, the man he was not, and really just love him wholeheartedly for who he was. And I just couldn't quite show up to my interactions with him with an open heart. There was always a little tinge of anger and resentment. And when he died, I tried to outrun that regret. And I might not have hurt anyone else in that process. I didn't relapse, but goddamn, I behaviorally spun out. I put regret in front of the grief and I thought I could outrun it. I tried to control my body, my food, my world in any way that I could because it was excruciating to come to grips with not showing up differently. And I got into therapy. I'm still in therapy. And all the while, I've had this sickness surrounding me still with my immediate family. So as I try to peel myself out from under the grief and stay sober and keep recovering and keep thawing out and keep forgiving, I've had this dysfunction and this sickness. And my sister has been suffering and suffering and suffering with addiction. And I've watched her friends, her loved ones, her marriage, everything fall away as it does when we use. Her children be taken, given back, taken, given back. And she called me one day in 2020, in the fall of 2020, very high and very delusional. And I was very scared for her. And when she came to and I made sure she was safe, I said, you have outrun your addiction too many times. And if you do not get sober, you are going to die. I had been in Al-Anon. I had done massive work on boundary setting to preserve my peace. And I'm so thankful because when you love an addict and you abandon yourself like little Sam did to take care of the addict, to try and fix and save them, you have nothing left of yourself, nothing. And because I have worked so hard in my recovery over a decade to establish and maintain boundaries with loved ones that are sick, there is something left of me. Even as I watched her slowly die, I kept a little spark of hope that she would get it. And she really tried. She tried so hard to get sober. And I knew she had slipped because the incessant phone calls that only a newcomer gives you, where they can't stop talking about themselves, had stopped. And I could only get her quickly on a text message. And it was a quick, oh, I'm okay. I'm really busy with this, that, and the other. Blah, 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 blah. Love you. Talk to you soon. And the story was the same. I'm sober. I'm doing the deal. I have a sponsor. And it was reminiscent of, that feeling of, my intuition is telling me something else than what she's saying to me. But I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to accuse. I'm not her higher power. I can't fix it. I can't change it. I can't cure it. She's an addict. If she's lying, she's got to be taken to her knees. I don't get to control the outcome. It has been a slow, painful grieving process, similar to what I imagine people experience when they have a loved one who has Alzheimer's, and you just slowly watch your loved one disappear from who you know their soul to be. Exquisite pain. And she showed back up again with a flood in my text thread of her face, bludgeoned, her nose broken, bruised, split lip, cracked tooth. I mean, harrowing pictures. And said it was a tale of slips, trips, and falls. And then I got all these messages from people that were around her on the East Coast at the time saying, I'm worried. Have you seen your sister's face? I know she's using drugs. Please, what can we do? What can we do? And I went to sleep that night. I called her. We had spoken. I let her tell me a bunch of lies about what happened, and I didn't accuse her. The next day I called and I just said, I thought a lot about what you said, and it seems like there's more to the story than what you're telling me. And if there is, I just want you to know that you're safe to share it with me. And that's what my recovery had me do. My insides were wrenched. My heart has been broken. I felt betrayed by her. I felt slapped across the face, punched in the stomach. I felt desperate to help her and save her. And yet I responded with love, with compassion, with surrender. And that is nothing short of a miracle, because unlike how I showed up in my relationship with my father, I have no regrets. I kept my heart open to her, even when she lied. And on March 13th, just a few short weeks ago, I got the phone call that I have been dreading my whole life, that my sister is dead. My fucking sister is dead. And I am in the grief. There's no regret in front of this grief. And so when it hits me, it is a straight shot to pain. The only way I can describe the feeling when I got that phone call is if you've ever seen a video of how our nerve endings fire. At the speed of light, they just zap. one neuron to another, connection, sending signals from the head through the body and back up, like sparks just flying. And it felt in that moment like half of my body, like the lights just went out, like a domino effect. Like every one of those nerve endings just died off, like a bunch of lights just going out. Literally, like half of me died in that moment too. I just felt severed from the inside. And to be honest, deeply afraid of what this grief was going to look like. And was I going to try to outrun it again? Was I going to harm myself? Was I going to try and control and manage and manipulate my whole world? And what was going to happen to me? How could I possibly survive my sister's overdose? My fucking sister. And all I can tell you is that it's the end of April. It's only been a little over a month. I'm raw. I am cut open. And what it feels like is everything in my life is in Technicolor. So when something hurts, it is insufferable. But when something is beautiful, it is magnificent. And I'm seeing everything. I am not head down in the mud with a dark cloud above my head every moment of every day. I am still finding gratitude. I am still finding joy. I have deep compassion for myself and whatever this is going to look like. I have a deeper commitment than I've ever had to tell the truth about my life, to tell the truth about addiction, to create, to fully embody my artistry and my talents. I have heard from so many people, and it's really interesting. People just don't know what to say. And here's what I can tell you about that. The best thing that anyone has asked me so far is, how is your heart today? If you don't know what to say to somebody who's grieving, don't try and relate to their grief by sharing about your own. Don't try to remind them of where to find gratitude for what they still have, for the fact that their loved one is no longer suffering. Don't tell them that you cannot imagine. So many people have said that, because you can, but you don't want to, because when you imagine losing a sibling or someone you love to a drug overdose, it hurts like fucking hell. And the wall goes up and you say, I can't imagine. I can't imagine. Don't say any of those things. Either listen or say, how is your heart today? And then shut up and listen. And let that person who's grieving think about how they want to answer that, because they might say, I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. Or they might say, God damn it, my heart fucking hurts today. Or I'm so angry. That is such a beautiful question. And ever since she asked me that, and I told people, That's what you ask. People have asked. And again, it's this beautiful thing in the middle of this horrific reality that is my life story right now. And what I want people to know, and I think this is the last thing I want people to know, is that there is a saying in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that we ought to match calamity with serenity. God, that's so important. I remember during my marital crisis thinking about that and going, God damn it, if I don't match the level of anger and resentment I feel with equal amounts of forgiveness and compassion, I am fucking screwed. And I did so much work every day to forgive. And it is no different now. There's a weird stigma when you're grieving that you should be sad, that how dare you laugh at a time like this. And I want to challenge that. I want to challenge you to think, can I match this grief, this suffering with equal amounts of joy, laughter, play, easefulness? Because I have to get through it. I need it more than ever. And so this incredible self-care routine I have been committed to for the last 3 years since losing my dad, that I post about on social media, but that I actually live and embody the way it is showing up for me in this grief. The fact that every 24 hours I get to wake up, ask myself how my heart is today, and based on the answer, go, I need calm. I'm going to go take yoga with this person. I need sleep. I'm going to cancel my first client and get another hour. I need laughter. I'm going to get together with my best friend who makes me howl on the floor. I need my mother. I'm going to call her on my way into work. Knowing what I need as a result of the work I have done in recovery and going and fucking claiming it every single day is not just keeping me alive right now. It is bringing me into a deep spiritual space where I feel closer to the person I have always wanted to be than I ever have. And that is not to say that some days aren't gut-wrenching, because they are. But they are also fucking beautiful. And I am going to leave you with that. I am going to share this. I want people to start talking about what's in their fucking heart. Life is too short. And if you're not ready, that's okay. I am going to light the way for you. I'm just going to keep living and loving with my whole heart. And I will see you real soon in the next episode of The Truth About Addiction. Love you guys.
I wanna help you, but I don't know how. I wanna guide you, but I can't figure it out. So tell me what you need, and tell me where you bleed, and I will listen. I can listen. Oh, I will listen to you. You seem so stuck there, holding on to some old story, still going strong. So tell me what you did, and tell me how you lived, and I will listen. I can listen. Oh, I will listen to you. Where can you go now? Can I keep you from falling down? If you just keep floating, you won't drown. There's a knowing that can be found. If you listen, can you listen? Oh, I will listen to you. There's a voice deep inside you that will be there to guide you. So tell me, what do you hear? Can you quiet your worst fear? If you listen, can you listen? Oh, I will listen to you. Where can you go now? Can I keep you from falling down? If you just keep floating, you won't drown. There's a knowing that can be found. If you listen, I can listen.